My mother sends red envelopes to everyone during the Mid-Autumn Festival. But don't send it to Grandma. Grandma scolded her for being unfilial and said that she would not leave a penny of the deposit to her. My mother was funny. I don't want your money. You are not rare, and you should also send me red envelopes. This is your duty. My mother's face turned cold. I have no obligation to you. 1. Mid-Autumn Festival holiday. I got home a little late because of the traffic jam. I missed a very important ceremony, kowtowing to Grandma. My grandmother is 72 years old. She is not very old, but she is very disciplined. She especially likes to arrange Dragon Boat Festival, Mid-Autumn Festival and Spring Festival. Her rule is that her children and grandchildren will kowtow to her. I came back late. I'm afraid Grandma will be nagging for a long time, and she will ask me to make up for it. Uncles and aunts are all here, and chatting with Grandma in the living room. I sneaked into the kitchen to help my parents. My mother said it was almost there, and asked me to go out. When I came out, Grandma was thinking about how capable she used to be. When she was working, none of the women in the village could catch up with her. Even the young man can't compare with her in the competition. After Grandpa passed away, how hard it was for her to raise their 5 siblings. She boasted that she could cook more than 20 tables of people in half a day alone. She said in disgust, "It's not like Shinshin's mother. She procrastinates. She can't even cook 3 or 4 tables of people, and she still needs Shinshin's father for help." Anyway, in Grandma's mouth, she is the most capable person. This family depends on her to have today. But the fact is that what Grandma said was all made up. The villagers said that Grandma was spoiled by Grandpa all her life. When she was young, she was the joke of the whole village, because she cries as soon as she works. Grandpa felt sorry for her, and didn't let her work. Grandma can't cook either. Throw all the messy things into the pot to cook. The neighbors laughed at the rice she cooked like pig food, and even the dogs disliked it. She also cried. My grandfather won't let her cook. Grandpa finished the work in the field every day, and then came back to cook, wash clothes and take care of the children. Yes, Grandma can't take care of the children either. The child cried, and she cried with him. The villagers talked to me the most. Your grandfather is a capable man. He grabbed inside and outside, but he was too tired and his body was defeated, so he left early. 2. That year, Grandpa was working in the sun and suddenly fell ill and fainted. The children are all in school. The people working in the nearby field saw it, and hurriedly called my grandmother. Grandma came to the field and cried. What should I do? What should I do? She had no choice but to cry. Someone helped take Grandpa to the hospital, and informed my father. My father was in his senior year of high school. When he rushed back, Grandpa was woken up, but it was a return to the light. Grandpa told my father to be filial to Grandma, and take good care of his younger brothers and sisters, so he swallowed his breath. My grandmother's weak shoulders can't afford to pick up this family. My father can only drop out of school, and come back to work to send his younger brothers and sisters to school. At that time, he was only 18 years old, but he became the mainstay of the family. Farmers are busy planting crops, and farmers are idle to do short-time work nearby to earn money. He can't stay too far away from home, because he has to take care of his grandmother. Grandma gave birth to 2 sons and 3 daughters. The children know that Grandma has been spoiled by Grandpa all her life. When they were young, they had to work, but Grandma could not do it. Therefore, like Grandpa, they are used to taking care of Grandma and spoiling Grandma. Grandma can't do anything. She also likes to brag and boast that she is very capable. Although we all knew that what she said was false, no one dared to fight her. Because I'm afraid that she will cry. No one wants her to cry during the spring festival, which makes the family sad and foggy, affect everyone's mood. So I tried my best to follow her and coax her. But every time Grandma said that after her grandfather passed away, it was when she worked hard to feed her 5 brothers and sisters. My father's eyes became gloomy. Dad loves studying the most, but because of his grandfather's death, he gave up the college entrance examination. Let's go far. Let's continue to talk about today. Aunts also take turns to go to the kitchen to help. So it's usually not my turn to go into the kitchen. The villagers said that my grandfather educated the children very well. Otherwise, my father's 5 siblings would not be so united. My father's eldest brother became a father, and provided his 4 younger brothers and sisters to go to college. They are all very grateful. 3. No matter where I go, they love me like my own daughter. This is to thank my father for his dedication to them. Uncles and aunts pay for the repair of the house at home. I respect my parents every time I come back. If Grandma doesn't act like a demon, our family will be considered perfect. However, Grandma is old, and it is impossible to let her change. So let her do it. Anyway, everyone should hold her as a child. It's time to eat. Grandma sits on top. The rules are here again. Everyone has to toast Grandma. What you drink is not wine, but tea or drinks, and you should also toast. Starting with my father. He said blessings to Grandma with a teacup. I wish her good health and a long life. Grandma smiled and took a sip of tea. Then it's my mother's turn. But my mother is gone. Grandma's face is about to have an attack. The aunt quickly followed. Mom, I wish you always beautiful and 18 years old. Grandma is happy again. When everyone finished, the food was cold. My mother brought it back to the kitchen, and my aunts also helped. There are so many people and they are talkative. It's perfunctory that my mother didn't toast tea and blessings. There is another rule for eating. No one can leave the table until grandma puts her chopsticks. When my 5-year-old cousin went to the bathroom, he had to report to his grandmother. Our grandchildren are fine. They don't have to sit at the same table with grandma. When they are full, they can play mobile phones secretly. The son's generation has to chat with grandma in a regular manner, and he can't answer the phone. Because the sky and the earth are big, grandma is the biggest. Nothing is more important than accompanying grandma. Finally, grandma put down her chopsticks. But he took out his mobile phone and opened the collection code. Everyone understands. Grandma is going to receive red envelopes. She likes that we send her red envelopes very much. I used to give her cash. But she doesn't deposit in the bank. Because she has never had a bank in her life. It turned out to be my grandfather who saved money. And later it was my father. Grandma's money is left at home. And she has to look at it every day to feel at ease. She either hides in the pillow, either stuff it in the shoes, either press it under the mattress. Once, she remembered that her uncle gave her 600 yuan. But no matter how you find it, it's only 500. She pointed at Sang and scolded Huai, saying that my mother had stolen it. My mother had just been born for a week, and she was in intermission. 4. In addition to serving my mother and my grandmother, my father also has to work in the field. When he came back, he saw his mother-in-law and daughter-in-law crying, and I cried too. He called his uncle and asked him how much money he had taken for his grandmother. The little uncle said that he only took 500 yuan. Grandma still didn't believe it, saying that my father partnered with her uncle to deceive her. That my mother was so angry that she wanted to hold me back to grandma's house. My father was so angry that he asked his grandmother to leave. She likes to go with anyone. Grandma cried and said that she had worked hard to raise my father. Now that she is old and useless, my father is going to drive her away. I don't want my mother when I have a daughter-in-law. I might as well die. She cried as she walked, hoping that my father would pull her back. But my father was busy making food for my mother and didn't take care of her. Grandma jumped into the pond. In broad daylight, someone saw her and pulled her up. She wants to jump 3 times and 4 times. My father came and knelt down to admit his mistake, and his head was broken. She didn't go home, so she sat by the pond and forced my mother to kowtow to her and apologize. My father couldn't ask my mother to go, and he was afraid that she would catch a cold, so he called my aunt in a hurry. The aunts and uncles rushed back. They gave my mother a monthly gift, and just returned to work a few days ago. The children coaxed and persuaded. My sister-in-law bought a password box and asked grandma to pack money specially. Everyone gave her some more money, and then she stopped. But she kept talking, and the box was not safe. They even took away the box, and I didn't even have the coffin book. No one knows how much money is in grandma's box. After having a smartphone, my sister-in-law bought one for my grandmother, and taught her to watch short videos. If grandma has a mobile phone to play with, she won't think nonsense. Grandma soon learned to chat and collect money on her mobile phone. Then don't accept cash anymore, and directly show the collection code. My father is the boss. He took the lead in scanning the code, and transferred 1,000 yuan to grandma. Uncles and aunts are the same as aunts and uncles. If the grandchildren have a job, they will sweep 500 yuan. Read and sweep 200. My sister-in-law's 5-year-old son swept 200 yuan. Of course, the money was given by my sister-in-law. 5. Everyone has finished sending red envelopes. My mother also cleaned up the kitchen and came out. Grandma handed over the mobile phone, and looked at my mother. My mother ignored me directly, sat down beside me, and asked me about my work and if I was tired. Grandma's face suddenly turned black. Grandma's outrageous thing is that she insisted that my mother send her red envelopes. If you don't give it, just splash and roll. My mother is very stubborn. She didn't send red envelopes to her grandmother, and didn't listen to anyone's advice. That's so everyone knows that the situation is not good. I'm afraid we're going to quarrel. Everyone solve it quickly. The uncle said, "Mom, let's go out for a walk." Don't go. There are people in this room who are unfilial. I have to say it today. Every spring festival, Grandma wants to hold a criticism conference, and the target is my parents. In her eyes, the children around her are the most unfilial. My father wants to talk back. My mother is not cold to her, and doesn't chat with her. She wants all her relatives and friends to help her blame my parents and criticize them, so that they must change. But everyone knows that my parents have worked hard, and it is my grandmother's work. But he didn't dare to criticize her, so he just talked about it. The aunt changed the topic and said, "The eldest brother and sister-in-law take care of my mother every day. It's very hard. I'll send you a red envelope." The second aunt, sister-in-law and uncle followed closely. They all sent it to my mother. My mother didn't refuse either. She smiled and said, "I'll send you one too." My mother sent red envelopes to everyone. My father and I both have it. But don't send it to Grandma. Grandma heard the sound of receiving red envelopes on our mobile phones. She looked at it again and again, but there was no movement on her mobile phone. Her heart is like a cat scratching, and her face is ugly. The children thanked my mother happily. Then the uncle and aunt also sent it to the children. That's why I'm willing to go back to my hometown during the holiday. I earned more red envelopes than I worked in the last month. Grandma felt that my mother stole the stain of her and said, I'll send it to you too. 6. She said, the boss is 500, the second's 500. She all sent it back in half. Our working grandchildren look at the mobile phone. Grandma's deposit 39103250 laughed out loud. Grandma urged, get it quickly. We all thanked Grandma, but no one dares to take her red envelope. Whoever received it, within 3 days, the whole village knew that so-and-so was unfilial. A few years ago, my sister-in-law had a difficult birth. I almost lost my life. After the doctor's full rescue, the sister-in-law finally gave birth to a little cousin. The mother and son stayed in the hospital for nearly a month. The sisters take turns to take care of them. My mother also went there. Grandma also cares about my sister-in-law very much. She asks my father every day if my sister-in-law has been discharged from the hospital. My father said, no, my little sister left at the ghost gate this time, and almost lost the adult and the doll. Grandma learned that everyone had transferred money to her sister-in-law and said, then I will also transfer 1,000 to her. Grandma transferred the money, but my sister-in-law didn't accept it. She insisted that her sister-in-law accept it and said, it's so far away that I can't come to see you. I can't help you when you come. There are doctors and nurses. This is what I gave to my grandson. You should take it quickly. She said a lot. My sister-in-law was afraid that if she didn't accept it, Grandma was uneasy, so she took it. Grandma was shocked and said to my father, she really accepted it. She actually accepted my red envelope. I'm an old woman. I don't have a job. How difficult it is to save some money. How dare she take my money? My father roared angrily. Don't give it if you can't bear it. If you give it, you will regret it. How can there be a mother like you in the world? Grandma was very wronged. She took her mobile phone and said everywhere in the village that her sister-in-law was unfilial and greedy for her money. This word reached my father's ears. He was very angry and called my mother to complain. As a result, my sister-in-law heard it, and she was so angry that she cried. My sister-in-law was out of the hospital and thanked everyone for their concern and sent red envelopes to everyone. Everyone doesn't accept it. 7. Grandma took it. When she saw that it was 5,000, she smiled happily. My father said, take your mobile phone and go to the village to tell everyone that the little sister is very filial. Grandma said, there's nothing to say about this. I deserve your filial piety. In fact, we didn't accept Grandma's red envelopes in the past. Since then, we have not accepted it. The red envelope sent by Grandma can only be returned tomorrow. She felt uncomfortable when she saw that the balance was much less. She pointed to my mother and said, daughter-in-law, you haven't sent me a red envelope yet. My mother looked at her and said, I'll take care of your food and accommodation, buy you clothes, wash your hair and take a shower. It's good that I didn't ask you for red envelopes. How dare you ask me for red envelopes? Grandma said, that's what you deserve. Let me tell you, if you don't show filial piety to me, I won't leave you a penny of my savings. My mother laughed. Do you really think I don't want your money? Grandma's words are unreasonable. You are not rare, and you should also send me red envelopes. This is your duty. My mother's face turned cold. I have no obligation to you. Grandma burst into tears. Listen to it. This is the daughter-in-law I paid for. My mother was furious. You spend money? Where did you spend the money? How much did it cost? When I got married, your family was very poor. I used my money to make up for you. How dare you spend money to marry me? Everyone panicked, and some pulled Grandma out. Some comfort my mother. Sister-in-law, you know that Mom is always confused and says nonsense. Don't take it to heart. My mother couldn't help crying and complaining about her injustice. Everyone knows it, but what can Grandma do? The holiday is over, and we are leaving. Before leaving, I installed a monitor at home. Take a look if you have nothing to do. Half a year later, one day, I turned on the surveillance and was stunned. My mother threw Grandma's password box out angrily. Then she pointed at her grandmother and shouted, get out! Get out of here! Don't harm people in my house. I don't want to be a widow at a young age like you. 8. In my memory, my mother has never been so broken. She smiled and chatted with me like a friend. She and my father are also considerate of each other and discuss all the big and small things at home. Only Grandma is the knot between them. My father can't untie this knot. As a son, it is his responsibility and obligation to show filial piety. As a husband, it is also his responsibility and obligation to protect my mother. He can only please both sides, and he would rather be wronged by himself. My mother is a village primary school teacher. She works conscientiously every day. I rush back after work to do housework and help my father do the work in the field. She doesn't want to see Grandma, but she cooks and stir-fry according to Grandma's taste every meal. I also wash clothes for Grandma. Grandma is very clean, but she is old and it is inconvenient to wash her hair and take a shower. It's inconvenient for my father to help her. It's also my mother who washed it for her. I once asked my mother, do you feel sad when you bathe your grandmother? My mother said lightly, you can't keep her dirty, can you? The sheets and quilt covers are dirty. Don't I also wash them? My mother also bought clothes for my grandmother, including hats, socks and shoes from the inside to the outside. Grandma likes to eat peppermint candy. Grandpa used to buy it for her. Now my mother also buys it for her. But if my mother didn't notice that she had finished eating and didn't buy it back in time, she would cry everywhere. It's like being greatly wronged. It can be said that my mother has done all her obligations for my father and grandmother. Grandma still spread my mother's unfilial remarks everywhere. People in the village said that my mother is one of the best daughters-in-law, but my grandmother is blessed. I know that my mother has suffered a lot of injustice. After I go to work, I want to take her to my place to relax. Mom said, I'm leaving. What about your father? 9. My mother feels sorry for my father, so she is willing to serve grandma for my father. But this has become grandma's chip to pinch her. For the sake of my father, my mother has always been patient. No matter what grandma did, she didn't get angry, she was just cold. What happened this time to make her so angry? Grandma stood outside the door and cried loudly. You unfilial woman. I originally built this house for my son. Why don't you give it to me? You still want to drive me away. You didn't send me a red envelope since I married you. You didn't kowtow to me. The clothes you bought are what you have tried and don't want. If I want to eat some peppermint candy, I will bow down and beg you to buy it. My grandmother's problem of talking nonsense can't be changed. She blamed my mother a lot, and only 2 of them were not wrong. One is that my mother doesn't give her red envelopes. The other is that my mother doesn't kowtow to her. Every year on the 3 major festivals and my grandmother's birthday, my uncles, aunts, 3 aunts and uncles have to take their families back to the countryside to spend the festival with my grandmother. This is also the rule set by Grandma. The whole room was crowded with children. Grandma sat happily in the living room in a brand new big red dress. She commanded, come on, line up in 3 rows and kneel down. Son, daughter-in-law, daughter and son-in-law kneel in the first row. The grandchildren got married and knelt in the second row. The unmarried kneels in the third row. She smiled and took the number of people and frowned. Why is there one less person? There will be one less person every time. Everyone knows it very well. Because what is missing is my mother. That my mother is extremely stubborn. Since I was very young, my mother didn't kowtow to my grandmother. It's useless to persuade anyone. Grandma is also stubborn. Every festival, she has to call my father's name and ask him to pull my mother out. My father is in a dilemma. One is the old ancestors. One is a tigress. He can't afford to mess with anything. 10. He has quarreled, shouted and scolded before. The family almost broke up. My mother left with her luggage. My father was so scared that he desperately carried him back. Later, he never dared to force my mother to do what she didn't want to do. In the face of Grandma's harsh reprimand, my father can only smile like a hippie. He said, Mother Shinshin is busy in the kitchen. I knock for her, I knock twice. Grandma said discontentedly, what can a kowtow delay? She is just unfilial. Although my mother's unfilial reputation has been spread everywhere, the villagers are not blind. On the contrary, they all sympathize with my mother's suffering. It's just that no one dares to speak for my mother in front of Grandma. Grandma couldn't call my father and asked me to pull my mother out. I said, I won't come out when I enter the kitchen. I have to help my mother. Grandma immediately changed her words and said, forget it, forget it. I'll ask your mother to make up for it later. It is impossible to make up for it. My mother can't bow down to Grandma in her life. Actually, I don't want to knock either. I always feel that this is feudal scum. However, when I first learned to walk, I was trained by my grandmother to kowtow. Train every day, and give delicious food when you kowtow. If a child is greedy, it is easy to be fooled. It's still happily knocking. That I have been kowtowing to adults since I was 1 year old. Knock 4 times a year. I have been knocking for more than 20 years, and I have long been used to knocking. It can't be changed for a while. On the other hand, my mother's anti-bone has come out in our family. If I become a rebel again, Grandma will be angry with good and evil, and the pain will be my father. I can only follow the flow and knock perfunctorily. Then my grandmother looked for an opportunity and asked my mother to make up for it. My mother is determined not to make up for it. She cried out and said that my mother was unfilial. No matter how much she cries, my mother doesn't care. In the end, the uncles and aunts persuaded Grandma to stop. Point 11. So every holiday, I am also very conflicted. I don't want to go home when I think of Grandma, but thinking of my parents' hard work, I want to go back and have a look. Besides, I also want to get together with my cousins. My mother doesn't send red envelopes or kowtow, which are the 2 thorns in my grandmother's heart. But according to Grandma's habit of wronging people, even if my mother sent her red envelopes and bowed to her, she will also pick on my mother's unfilial. In the surveillance, Grandma cried and complained that my mother was unfilial. My mother slammed the door with a cold face. If the villagers didn't know that my grandmother did it, I would have thought it was really my mother's hateful. I couldn't see my father. I was shocked when I thought of my mother's words as a widow. Can't something happen to my father? I quickly looked back at the surveillance. The surveillance is located at the door of the living room. It rotates 360 degrees and can be seen in the living room and the courtyard dam. I saw my father riding a tricycle in the morning and pulling a truck full of vegetables to sell on the street. My grandmother wore a new dress and went out. Because it was the weekend, my mother didn't go to school. She swept the yard, and then washed clothes, sheets and quilt covers. She was busy all morning. The yard dam is full of clothes. Finally, after washing, my mother was also tired and sat down at the door to rest. Grandma came back singing a little song. Seeing my mother sitting at the door looking at her mobile phone, her face sank and she said, "I know how to use my mobile phone. What time is it? Aren't you cooking yet?" My mother ignores her. Grandma also knows that my father is not at home. It's useless for her to lose her temper with my mother. Maybe she will be hungry. She muttered and went into the room. It's 12 o'clock. Everyone has eaten, but our family hasn't cooked yet. My mother looked at her mobile phone for a while before she got up to cook. My father came back from selling the vegetables, and the food was cooked. 12. My mother brought the food into the living room. Grandma complained, "It's so hot, how can I eat it? It's clear that it should be cooked and dried early." My mother interrupted her faintly. "I put the rice bowl in cold water for a while. Now it's not cold or hot, which is just right." Grandma has nothing to say. My father eats fast and doesn't rest, so he has to go into the field to make vegetables. Grandma said, "Big boss, wait a minute, I have something to discuss with you." My father stopped and asked, "What's the matter?" "You transfer the house to me." My father was puzzled. "Why did you transfer the house to you?" Grandma said, "The house should be mine." My father was angry with her. "You are in your 70s. Why do you want to transfer the house? Didn't we give you food or didn't wear you? You don't have to do the work of heaven and earth." My mother is ready to go into the kitchen with a bowl. Grandma stopped her. "Old daughter-in-law, you two have a discussion. I'm going to get married." My mother glanced at her unfazed. "You don't have to tell me about your marriage, just tell your children." Grandma made a fuss about getting married, not once or twice. She makes a fuss several times a year, saying who introduced her to another person. As the saying goes, if it rains, the mother will get married. My grandmother really wants to get married, and no one can stop her. The reason why there is no follow-up is that people begin to think that she is quite beautiful and speaks gently. But after a few days of contact, it can be seen that she is very good, crying, stingy, and always unreasonable. Who wants to remarry a sperm? Even if the man is willing, his children will not agree. So my mother doesn't care about her marriage at all. But her next words made my father angry. She said, "My partner is 55 years old and very handsome. He likes me very much, and is also willing to be my son-in-law. But I don't have a house in my name, so you want to transfer the house to me." 13. My father said, "If you want to get married, you can get married. It's okay to let him come to your door. The house can't be transferred to you." Grandma said, "I don't have a house, and my boyfriend doesn't feel safe." My mother was funny. "If you give him your money, he won't feel safe?" Grandma said righteously, "I gave it, but it's too little." My father asked, "Did you give it all to him?" "It's all given. If you don't believe it, you can see." Grandma took the mobile phone to my father, went into the room, and took out her password box and said, "I also gave it to him in this box." My father looked at the empty password box, and then at his mobile phone. He laughed bitterly and said, "My mother is really capable. She is reluctant to spend a penny for her children and grandchildren. For a strange old man, she can't wait to empty all her family." Grandma said angrily, "Why can't I be reluctant? I will send you red envelopes during the spring festival, but you don't receive them yourself." My father asked her back, "Who dares to take it? Tell yourself, who dares to take your red envelope? The little sister received a red envelope from you, and you scolded her for being unfilial everywhere. That year, I didn't take you in my heart, and you scolded me." When my father said this, I remembered it. One year during the spring festival, on the 30th night of the Chinese New Year, Grandma gave red envelopes to all children. At that time, there were not many children, only 8. Naturally, no one took it, because we are not allowed to get Grandma's red envelope, because we beat our little parents. The next day is the first day of the first lunar month. In the evening, those red envelopes were returned. Grandma took the inventory one by one, and then found that one was missing. She said, "I sent 8 red envelopes, why only 7? Who took it?" We all shook our heads to show that we didn't get it. She checked it carefully and pointed at me. "Zhou Xinshin, you got it." I said, "I didn't get it." 14. Grandma scolded me harshly. "You still lie. They all returned but you didn't. Why do you love money so much? You can't see money in your eyes, can you?" In front of the relatives in the room, she scolded me loudly. I'm 17 or 18 years old, just like stealing was caught in public, ashamed and angry. I took my mobile phone and asked her to look, but she didn't. The aunt said that I wouldn't get her red envelope, but she didn't listen. My mother came out, snatched her mobile phone, clicked it to check, and said, "The last one you sent to your heart last night is less than 24 hours now. What are you in a hurry?" Grandma didn't admit it. "I obviously sent it together." "You just poke it with one finger. Why do you send it together?" Grandma said with hatred, "Just protect it. Your daughter didn't admit that she received my red envelope. What's the difference with stealing? Stealing needles when you are young. Stealing gold when you are old. You don't care now. You will regret it in the future. Her mobile phone suddenly sounded a billing prompt. The eldest aunt hurriedly said, I'm back. Mom, take a look. Grandma took a look and smiled. I'm back, I'm relieved. My father said, Mom, why don't you apologize to her? Grandma glared at me. Children, why do you apologize? My mother said, Child, you should also apologize for wronging her. You also say that Shin is a thief. I know my daughter. She never takes other people's things. She has never received the red envelopes you sent since she was a child. You wronged her indiscriminately. Grandma's voice became louder. What if I wronged her? You killed me. Isn't it just a red envelope? It's a big deal. You two are endless and have no pattern at all. 15. The aunts dissuaded her one after another, and asked her to say a few words. I pulled my mother into the bedroom. My mother suddenly cried. Mom is really useless. Let my daughter be wronged. I hugged her and said, I'm not wronged. As long as my parents believe me, I don't care what others say. Both aunt and uncle came in, and apologized to us on behalf of Grandma. I also know in my heart that everyone believes in me except Grandma. So I quickly came out of my grievance and slowly forgot about it. But now I know that this has always been a thorn in my parents' hearts. They can forgive Grandma for hurting them, but Grandma's hurt to their children stuck in their hearts like a needle, lingering. My father mentioned this, and Grandma didn't regret it. She said angrily, You still have to check with me. I gave birth to you with blood and blood in October, and I raised you with hard work. If you don't remember anything good about me, I'm sorry for you. Your mother is a bad guy and a bully landlord, so you kill me. Unreasonable. My father was so angry that he turned around and left. Grandma chased and scolded. What did you say? I'm unreasonable? You short-lived one. Can you scold your mother like this? Where are you running? Transfer the house to me. If you don't want to live in the house, just give me 200,000 yuan, and I'll buy it off the relationship with you. My father ignored it, strode out and slammed it. Grandma scolded loudly. If you cut your brain, you can't bear to give me 200,000 yuan. You are so unfilial, and the Lord God will accept you. My mother was furious. She is an extremely short-sighted person. Protect not only my father, but also me. Even Grandma can't scold Dad. What's more, this is too vicious. How can a mother curse her son like this? My mother took Grandma's password box and threw it out, telling her to get out. Grandma stood outside, crying loudly and talking about all kinds of unfilial piety to my mother. 16. My mother was so angry that she opened the door and scolded. You have been blessed for a lifetime, making heaven and earth, relying on the old and selling the old. Children coax you as children. You are not ashamed but proud. You have lived for decades, but you have achieved nothing. You can't even cook porridge. Your man is busy every day, and he is tired to death at a young age. He was killed by you, a promising woman. You still say that your fate is miserable, and your fate is caused by me? It's your own fault. You didn't kill your man, but you cursed your son. Do you want your son to die, and want me to be a widow at a young age? That's right. You raised 5. The boss is dead, and there are still 4 left for you. But he is my man. It's my father. What should I do if he dies? What should I do with my heart? You are an old demon's heart is darker than the bottom of the pot. It's no exaggeration to say that you are black-hearted and rotten. We have been raising you for so many years, and there is no merit in hardship. But if you are not satisfied, if you hook up with a wild man, you will rob our house. You curse my man to death. It doesn't matter if you don't love your son. We are not rare. I love him, and my daughter loves him, that's enough. I want him to live well. I want him to live a long life. I want to grow old with him. Get out if you can't get used to it. My mother threw out Grandma's clothes and documents. Many neighbors gathered around to watch the fun. Everyone talked and persuaded, and there was a lot of discussion. My mother has always been a very introverted person, and she believes that the family's disgrace should not be publicized. In the past, quarrels were when the door was closed. Today, she deliberately opened the door so that everyone could hear it. My father is also back. He stood behind the crowd and looked at it silently for a while. He came in to pick up Grandma's clothes and documents, and said to his mother, Don't be angry, my wife. I'll send her away now. 17. Grandma said, I'm not leaving. This is my house. This is my home. I'm not going anywhere. My father pointed to the old tile houses behind the house. That's your house. My father left it to you. You can either live in the back later. What do you want to eat and cook? Don't disturb our lives. Just think I'm dead. Your eldest son is dead. Either you go to Lao Si's house. I want to change the lock of the gate. You can't come in without our permission in the future. Grandma shouted. What's wrong with this? I've suffered all my life and raised my eldest son. Now I'm going to kick me out of the house. You don't have the eldest son. He's dead. Go find other children quickly. My father couldn't help but pull Grandma out. The neighbors came to my mother to comfort her. My mother couldn't help crying anymore. I'm also crying here. I feel a little resentful of my grandfather. What kind of grandmother did he marry for me? It made the whole family restless. After the neighbor left, I saw my mother sitting in the living room with tears flowing silently. I'm heartbroken. At this time, my father sent me a message asking me to call my mother. He was worried that my mother would not think about it. I promised to call my mother quickly. I said, "Mom, I saw the surveillance." I cried with her while comforting her. My mother told a lot about grandma being cheated. Once she bought a water purifier. Things that can be bought for more than 300 yuan on the internet. She spent 6,800 yuan. There are also other people in the village who were fooled. Some bought it for 3 or 8,000 yuan. And some bought it for 4,008 yuan. Grandma said generously, "I want the best." People said, "The best is this one, 6,008." 18. When my parents came back, they saw that everything had been installed in the kitchen. Grandma asked my father for money. "I bought it for your health." They said that it should be clean and hygienic with this thing. My grandmother likes to show off that her children are promising, and give her a lot of money. Except for the 2 bosses who are hopeless, the 4 of me can do a good job. She only admitted that her aunt and uncle gave her money, and did not admit that my father had also given her money. Later, she bought another pot, a 5-piece set of 50 yuan on the internet. She bought it for 600 yuan. A water cup, the so-called negative ion cup, for 3 yuan online. She bought it for 60 yuan. There are apples on my tree. My grandmother can't help but say 3 good words from others. He shouted a few times. "Auntie, help me. If it's not sold out today, it's a pity." She generously bought back a bag of 50 caddies. Apples have been aged for too long, and there is no apple flavor, and they don't like to eat them. It was almost rotten in less than 2 days. Grandma didn't allow me to throw it away. She said to peel off the rotten part and chop it into porridge. That's what others have worked hard to grow. Isn't it a waste of other people's efforts to throw it away? My father threw it into the pit, and she kept complaining. She also bought all kinds of healthcare products, which were piled up everywhere in the room, but she didn't eat them. She said, "Experts say that it's better to have children than to have them in your own bag. The money can't be left to our children for safekeeping. We have to take care of it ourselves. We should buy it, and eat it when it's time to eat it." She still wants to buy a high-tech mattress, which will be more than 20,000 yuan. My mother is determined not to allow my father to give money. You gave it to her today, and she will be fooled next time, because she doesn't feel sorry for using our money. Grandma complained for a long time, because she couldn't buy this mattress. Then what kind of electrotherapy chair? More than 4,000. 19. I feel terrible when I hear it. As you can imagine, my mother's heart must be blocked. My parents have been having a hard time these years. For an old lady like my grandmother, I can't beat her and scold her. She cried when she said something heavy. I said, "Dad sent Grandma to Uncle's house. Mom can also have a good rest and stop worrying about her." My mother nodded and said, "When I'm free, I'll go to your place." Good. I promised repeatedly. After my father sent my grandmother to my uncle's house, he rushed back overnight. That night, the family group held an emergency meeting. Everyone knows that Grandma cursed my father and comforted my parents first. Then the eldest aunt said, "The eldest brother and sister-in-law have taken care of my mother for so many years. Let us take care of her in the future." The second aunt, uncle, and sister-in-law all agree. They agreed that the family would take care of Grandma for a year. Don't worry about my parents. Just go to their house to see Grandma at any time. Then he mentioned the problem of being cheated out of Grandma's money. The uncle said, "She said she was cheated of more than 200,000 yuan. I thought about whether I could catch him back, but she didn't even know his name. He said that the man asked her for directions and knew him. He praised her for his beauty, and she fainted." That my father said, "I'm afraid it's difficult to catch up, and there is no surveillance in the countryside. Maybe he is from other places. He has run away long ago." My sister-in-law was puzzled. "Why is my mother so stupid? None of us is so in love. I didn't see a penny from others, but I put all my own family into it." The uncle said again, "I feel that the man cheated the house is fake, and the purpose is still for money, because my mother said that if the eldest brother doesn't transfer the house to her, he will give her 200,000 yuan to buy the relationship." I asked if the man said it, and my mother admitted it. 20. The aunt said, "This mother is a love brain. She is wrapped up and burned to eat, and she also helped her count the money." That I think my grandfather is the real love brain. He married a top-class spirit, risking his own life, and harming his descendants. The second aunt suggested, "In the future, send red envelopes to my mother no more than 100 at a time." She couldn't bear to spend money, so she gave it to a liar. "I'm so sick. It's not easy for anyone to make money." My father said, "In the future, send it to 10 yuan and send it to her several times. She will listen to the sound and have fun." Everyone agrees. Later, in the group, I often saw my uncle sending videos of my grandmother making noise. Auntie said, "I admire my sister-in-law so much. In the past, I only thought it was my mother's work, but now I know that she is a particularly difficult person to serve. But my sister-in-law has served her for so many years. My mother has served my grandmother for so many years, and she has mastered a whole set of experience and taught it all to them." Uncle also told a joke. Grandma began to clamor to come back to find the old man. The uncle said, "Go back by yourself. I don't have time to see you off." Grandma is a road idiot, and has a very poor sense of direction. When she went out, She didn't even know which direction her home was in, so she doesn't have the courage to go back to her hometown alone. Later, she followed others to dance in the square and fell in love with another old man, so she left the liar old man behind. One day, she told her uncle that she was going to get married, but she has been at her uncle's house for almost a year. The aunt knew it and picked her up quickly. Grandma danced in the square at her aunt's house, and also fell in love with one. Later, in the second aunt's house and the little sister-in-law's house, they both fell in love with different old people. But before he could develop, he moved to another child's home. When she returned to her uncle's house, the old man she liked had remarried. 21. After a long time, the essence of Grandma's work was shown, and others respected her. Those old mans didn't pay attention to her. After Grandma left our house, my parents were in a much better mood. My mother is retired. My father doesn't want to make a lot of money by growing vegetables. The two of them went to the field together, harvested fresh vegetables and fruits, and delivered them to me together. I took them around the city, and invited them to watch 3D movies, and play things that I had never played before. My mother is as happy as a little girl. My father also spoils her like a baby. My grandfather's family has the gene of spoiling his wife. Uncle also spoils his wife very much. Several uncles also spoil their wives. This also makes me yearn for marriage. But I'm not in a hurry. As Mom said, children who grow up in loving families will not be in a hurry to get married, but will slowly find until they meet the most suitable one for themselves. Every year during the Spring Festival we go to where Grandma is. She still wants red envelopes. Adults give them 10 yuan, and we give them one by one. She kept clicking red envelopes, and listened to the beautiful prompts that kept ringing happily. By the way, Grandma's rules have also changed a lot. For example, the matter of kowtowing has been cancelled. It was cancelled by a post-0. That year Grandma was at my second aunt's house. The youngest son of the second aunt brought his girlfriend back for the first time. When he entered the room, he saw a large area of people kneeling in the living room. The girl was so scared that she asked, "Is your family dead?" The whole house was silent. One is an old predecessor, and the other is a new customer. I can't afford to offend. The grandmother sitting in front of her turned pale. "What's the girl talking about? I'm living a good life." The cousin's girlfriend said, "What does the living person cow to? Our family only kowtows to the dead during the Spring Festival." 22. I admire the courage of the post-0 generation. If you have something to say it directly, and never hide it. It doesn't matter whether you are happy or not, as long as I'm happy. At that time, everyone comforted Grandma in a mess and covered up the matter. But the next day, Grandma caught a cold and vomited and had diarrhea. He was sent to the hospital overnight, and stayed in the hospital for 3 days before he came back. The little girl after midnight said, "Look, I just said that you can't kowtow to the living. It's unlucky. I don't know if I can kowtow to the living. It should be one side and one vulgarity." But Grandma's illness really scared her. She complained that her children didn't remind her. "You know you can't kowtow. Why do you still kowtow every year? Isn't this a curse for me to die?" Everyone can only admit their mistakes. I asked my father, "Did you kowtow when Grandpa was here before?" My father replied, "No, your grandfather doesn't have any rules. Everything is from your grandmother's rise after I got married, because she enjoys the taste of being respected and spoiled. I think Grandma is so incompetent that she is afraid that her children and grandchildren will dislike her." My mother said, "Your grandmother was supposed to set the rules for me alone, but I was the only one who didn't listen to her." I was stunned, and didn't know what to say for a moment. After a while, I came forward to hug my mother and said, "Mom, are you happy now?" My mother patted my hand and said with a smile, "I have always been very happy." My father looked at my mother very affectionately. He knows how much my mother has suffered, but my mother is an open-minded person. She has endured her grandmother's work for more than 20 years. Now Grandma is not in our house. She never talks about her previous suffering, or complains about my father. She never said that she had suffered in this family for so many years for me. She left all her past troubles behind. Just enjoy the beauty of life to the fullest. End.